This is Zichru Daf Simanim Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Chaf, and Daf Chaf is going to be a cafe. Chaf is a cafe. So who is on the way to the cafe? It's none other than the king. And the king, as you can see over here, is he's going to get a meal. He's at a distance from the actual funeral in order not to be fully participating, as we know the king's conduct at the Levaya. On the way, there's a fence, but the fence is being broken down by the king's henchmen over here as they say, no, the king's path is this way. And finally, in the cafe, there's a conversation whether they're supposed to properly request the king. Is it one of the three mitzvahs when entering Eretz Yisrael, or was it the wrong thing to request? So Dav Chaf, it's a cafe, and on the way to the cafe is a levaya, and the king is at a distance. He doesn't want to be mamish involved in the levaya. His men are going to break down the fence, as the king can break open a field wherever he wants. And finally, the discussion whether it's appropriate to ask for a king or not. So we dive a little bit deeper, and point number one is the king's conduct as a levaya, David by Abner's levaya. Says the Mishnah, a close relative dies in Yosef Palatine Shalai doesn't leave the palace. Rav Yehuda says no. If he wants to follow, he calls, because we find that David followed Avner at the Levaya. The Chachamim say no. David only did it Lefaye, says but it's not the right thing to do. Says the Raisa. Tanakama says the minhag is women walk behind. Then they do so. If the minhag is they walk in front, they do so. Says Rav Yehuda, no. The minhag is they always walk in front. We found David walked behind. It must be that the women were in front. Again, the Chacham once again responds and says, David HaMelech is going to calm the people, so you can't have a riot where the women are in that story. Point number two is the power of the king, the king's henchmen breaking down the fence. Again, Dav Chaf on the way to the cafe. The king's henchmen breaking down the fence. The Mishnah says the king can wage discretionary war if Sanhedrin agrees, and he can make a fence wherever he wants. The king's path is no size limitation. The king gets the spoils of the war first. The Sefer Shmuel, the king's powers are listed. He can do all these things, levy taxes. Rav says, no, not that he's entitled. But of course, the king shouldn't actually do these things. And point number three is the conversation in the cafe. The cafe on Dav Chaf is whether it's appropriate to request the king. The Brayser of Yehuda says, point the king, destroy Amalek, build the Beis HaMikdash. Rav Nerai says, don't embarrass Keneged Ta'arumaisa. No, because Kal Yisrael complained. V'amarta asiu alecha melech. The king Shabbatar Kaigin. So therefore they were told that they should. Says Rav Eliezer, it was appropriate to know a melech l'shaftenu avalam ha'aret sheben kilkulu v'hainu gam anachnu chol ha'gayim shaftenu malkeinu v'yotz lefanenu. So we have Dav Chaf and we have the cafe, and who is on the way to the cafe? It's none other than the king. The king following at a distance, whether he's not supposed to go at all, or whether we have a right from David HaMelech that he followed by Avner, or whether it was just to calm down the people. The king's men are breaking open the fence. The king's size limitations have no bounds. And finally, is it appropriate to request a melech or not, being discussed in the cafe on Dav Chaf of Gemara Sanhedrin.